This is a true story. It happened to a friend of mine, Dr. Werner von Bunsenburner. I used to see Werner every year at the League of Mad Scientists convention in Poughkeepsie. But even for a mad scientist, Werner was foo-foo crazy. He was always going on about how he was going to preserve his brain so he could live forever. We all laughed and told him he was crazier than a soup sandwich. All of us other mad scientists knew that the real money was in creating products for late-night infomercials. But Werner was determined. He turned his back on the League of Mad Scientists and worked night and day on his brain-preserving invention. He went without food, without sleep, even without television. I told you he was crazy. But he got his machine to work. He managed to zap his own brain into a jar where the special preserving liquid would keep it alive forever. Okay, but there was a problem. You see, his brain was in this jar on a shelf, and it had to stay there with nothing to do. It was connected up to a voice synthesizer, but there was no one to talk to. You know, without a body, immortality sucks. So, he was imprisoned in this jar on his own for weeks, months, years. He was going out of his mind because he couldn't go out of his mind, if you follow. And Werner's lab never got any visitors. So, Werner resigned himself to living the rest of his long, long life all alone. Until a burglar came crashing through his window. Werner saw this as a golden opportunity. He could use his machine to switch brains with the burglar and escape. All he had to do was lure the burglar into it. So, using his voice synthesizer, Werner made an announcement.
Attention!
He said,
This is a computerized alarm system. Do not go near the vault safe. Repeat, do not attempt to open the vault safe where all the valuables are.
well, the burglar's face lit up, and he went right over to what he thought was the vault safe.
No, don't do it. You'll be sorry.
Yelled the brain, trying to suppress its glee. The burglar turns the wheel to open the safe, and the brain-sucking machine came down from the ceiling onto his head. The burglar's brain wound up in the jar. But even better, Werner's brain was sucked into the body of the burglar. At last, he had a body again. He could interact with the rest of the world. He ran outside for the first time in years. Oh, the sweet smell of fresh air. The sounds of nature. The feel of the cool green grass under his feet. Yes, for the first time in years, Werner could enjoy all the smells, sounds, and sensations the world had to offer. But then Werner saw something really sensational. The first Fräulein he had seen in decades. This must be love, thought Werner. He stood there, transfixed, trying to muster the courage to go over to her. Then he discovered why he couldn't move. He was surrounded by policemen who put him in handcuffs and leg irons. You see, the burglar who broke into Werner's office was wanted for a series of robberies. And Werner's new face and fingerprints pointed to him being the burglar. Werner couldn't convince the police that he was no thief, just an honest mad scientist trapped in the body of a habitual criminal. In fact, the judge was so disgusted at Werner's ridiculous claims, she decided he must pay the maximum penalty for the burglar's crimes. Life in solitary confinement. That was a true story. It happened to a friend of mine, Dr. Werner von Bunsenburner. He got burnt all right. He escaped his jar, only to end up in the jig.
This is a
mine, Ruth Smedley, a chemistry professor. The college had a reputation for discovering some of the brightest stars in the world of academia. But from time to time, a student came along that one would recognize as a black hole in the bunch. In this particular case, there were two. Peter and Paul were perhaps the most obnoxious young troublemakers to ever set foot in those hallowed halls of higher learning. They were chemistry majors, but most of their experiments were performed outside the laboratory. And they usually involved members of the periodic table of elements that could be combined to make the most obnoxious sounds, offensive sights, and nauseating odors. First, it was bubbles in the school fountain. Good clean fun, you say? Ha-ha! Then the washroom stink-o-rama. There was nothing clean about that. Then the floating food in the cafeteria. Uplifting for a moment, perhaps, but ultimately ending in a vile, sticky mess. There was little doubt amongst the faculty and student body as to who were the architects of all the mayhem. But Peter and Paul seemed to have skin like Teflon. No one could pin the blame on them and make it stick. By year's end, Peter and Paul were still holding on to passing grades, much to the chagrin of Professor Smedley. It irked her to no end that these thorns in her side kept coming up smelling like roses. She couldn't wait to see the backs of their fat heads heading out the door for the last time. It was the night before the important final examination. Figuring they could easily keep up their D grade on the final, Peter and Paul decided that instead of studying like other students, they'd sneak out for one last night of bone-headed buffoonery. The venue of choice on this particular evening was the women's dormitory. Their goal, as always, was to wreak havoc for no particular reason whatsoever. For Peter and Paul, it was a night to remember. Unfortunately, they failed to remember to set their alarm. They made a mad dash to the auditorium, but by the time they got to the exam room, it was all over. They'd missed it. Their hijinks had finally caught up with them. Their parents would kill them if they didn't at least get passing grades, or at least make them pay back the rather hefty tuition fees. They had to think fast, so they did the only thing they could do under the circumstances. They threw themselves at the mercy of Professor Smedley. And together they conjured up the most unbelievable crock about going away to a retreat and studying for hours, getting so involved in the research that they barely had enough time to get back. But wouldn't you know it, and much to their horror, they got a flat tire. And of course the car had no spare, and on they went, deeper into their lives. To Peter and Paul's surprise, when they looked up at Professor Smedley, she seemed to be buying it. In fact, she said, I'm going to give you boys a second chance to improve your year-end mark. Yes, I'll let you take the exam, and it's going to be worth 100% of your grade. Needless to say, the boys couldn't believe their luck. Yes, this was their finest hour. They pulled one over on Smedley, what? But even better, now they might get decent marks, which would definitely impress their folks. Not bad after goofing around for 3 years. So the boys hit the books and pulled an agonizing all-nighter. The next morning, Peter and Paul were all set to ace the final exam. They arrived right on time. Professor Smedley gave them each an exam booklet with their name on it. Seemed strange to Peter and Paul that she put them in separate rooms. The first question was worth 5% and was a no-brainer about what chemical compounds could be mixed together to form different types of gases. Neither boy had a problem with that one. The next question, worth 95% of the year's final mark, was not nearly so easy. Oh, no. It was just 4 simple words, and it had the boys completely flummoxed. The question read, which tire was flat? This is a true story, happened to a friend of mine. As for Peter and Paul, they never did graduate, but they were able to eke out a meager existence doing what they did best, clowning around.
This is a true story. It happened to a friend of mine. Smelly Kelly's this guy from the neighborhood, right? Got his nickname for obvious reasons. See, Smelly Kelly worked in the sewers, and what's more, he liked it. Hey, it's what makes you happy that counts, right? But Smelly wasn't gonna get rich and famous hanging around down there. Yeah, well, that's what we all thought, too. But see, one day, old man Griznat sent for Smelly Kelly. Smelly went right up to the miser's mansion on the Upper West Side. Now, anyone who read a paper could tell you about Griznat. Rich, 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 and mean, mean, mean. This guy closed an orphanage once to open a drive-through yogurt shack. Smelly Kelly was ushered in the front door, and he stopped dead. Because at the top of the stairs was the most beautiful girl Smelly had ever seen. Their eyes locked for a split second, see? But then the butler shoved Smelly into the master's study, mostly in self-defense. Oh, the girl was a real beauty. Right out of Smelly's league. The crinkly old miser sat there, and he got right to the point. I want you to map me out the whole underground of the city, he said. Never been done in 100 years. Gonna buy the whole thing and charge the public by the flush. Smelly was excited, right? He was already dreaming about all the caverns of putrid slime and rivers of sludge no one had ever seen. Smelly didn't think twice about quitting his job with the city right there and then. He was down there for months, years even. Never saw daylight for weeks on end. Packs of rats started following him around as he crisscrossed through the underground maze. Slipping through traps no one even knew were there. Ducking through grids no wider than a river snake's behind. But one day, finally, the maps were done. Smelly was a sewer genius, right? But he was broke. So he took a 300-year-old viaduct to an ancient set of stairs and popped out in old man Griznat's laundry room. But this is where everything went bad for Smelly, right? He and his putrid odor hauled themselves into the old man's den, presented him with the best, stinkiest set of sewer maps anyone ever saw, and the old man just kicked him out. Seems he lost interest in the whole deal like hours after Smelly went underground. Just never bothered to tell the guy. Oh, and he wasn't paying him neither. Smelly tried getting his job back with the city, but his old co-workers found his new aroma a little hard to take. He was on the street when the news hit. Billionaire's granddaughter swept away. It seems old man Griznat's granddaughter's diamond necklace fell off and went right down an open manhole. The kid reached in for it, and boom, down she went too. Smelly lost no time. He dove in the nearest sewer grate and off he swam. Not uptown where the girl fell in, but downtown where he knew the girl was headed. Smelly swam fast and hard. He took a left, then a right. Then another sharp right. And then he waited. The current was unbelievably strong, but no girl. Just then, a twisting lump of tangled dress came swirling round the corner, hit one wall, then the other, and then it screamed at the top of its lungs, "This is so much fun!" Smelly caught the girl in his arms as she whooshed past. They were made for each other, right? You could see it in their eyes. And you could sure smell it with your nose. This is a true story. It happened to a friend of mine. Good thing they handed out clothespins at the wedding, huh?
Now,
this is a true story. It happened to a friend of mine, Vern, and his 5-year-old kid, Charles. Vern and his truck, Big Bertha, were snaking out the interstate waiting for something to happen. He had his kid along to sort of, show him the ropes. Never can start him too young these days. Anywho, it was young Charlie who spotted him first. A busload of kids were on a field trip to the planetarium. Anyhow, the bus driver, he must have been somewhere else, because when he took the cutoff, he completely misses the big sign that says, low bridge, maximum clearance 6 feet. And whammo! When they said maximum clearance 6 feet, they meant it. Vern revs up the engine on Big Bertha and gets his butt down there as fast as he could to see if he could help, and maybe make a good buck on a tow, just to show his kid how it's done, you see. The kids on the bus were okay, thank goodness. And the driver, well, he was more embarrassed than anything. But that bus was wedged in there like nothing Vern had ever seen. I mean, this was a real good one. Vern tried and tried to get that sucker out of there. Even Big Bertha couldn't tow out that bus. It was well and truly stuck, my friend, like gum on the bottom of your shoe. So Vern finally gives up and calls fire company number 1, who responded in record time. They couldn't save Big Bertha, though. A real shame. So anyways, the firemen turned their attention to the 24 children still trapped in the tunnel. A leak in the fuel tank added a whole new wrinkle to the problem. See, the kids couldn't get out. And if the firemen created a spark, the fuel could ignite and kablooey! There'd be an explosion to end all explosions. They decided they needed somebody higher up to make that kind of call. Vern and Charlie stood clear, and soon the whole place was swarming with cops, engineering experts, and a slew of looky-loos. Not to mention every major news station in the tri-state area. Within minutes, the whole country had its eyes on the drama unfolding. And with the press, of course, came the politicians. I'm telling you, they came like cockroaches out of the woodworks. Well, the mayor finally shows up and puts himself personally in charge. I mean, after all, it was an election year, and something like this could make him a hero. All he needed was a simple solution. And soon, he assured the crowd that everything was under control. He and his people were going to get everything right. Those kids were going to be fine. And that's when Charlie decided to get in on the action. Charlie was a smart kid, you see. He noticed a lot of things other people might miss. You see, Charlie had an idea, but the mayor was far too busy making sure that the press was impressed with the job he was doing. He just said, "That's nice. Now go find something to do, kid." Well, things weren't getting any better, so they decided to bring in the big gun. The mayor had clout, no doubt about it, but brute force just wasn't going to cut it. The bridge looked like it might collapse at any moment. That's when Charlie gave the mayor another try. Charlie tried to get a word in edgewise again, but the mayor shut him down like a road closure. "I thought I told you to go find something to do, kid." At first, Charlie was a little hurt. I mean, nobody was listening to him. Then he got angry. And then he got evil. He walks right under the police line. The mayor yells, "Stop that kid!" The police pulled out their bullhorns. Vern even called out to him. But Charlie just went up to the bus and stuck his lollipop in the pressure release of the tires. Everybody stops and stares. I mean, what the heck was this kid up to? In seconds, those tires had gone flatter than a skunk in the middle of the road. And the bus was clear of the bridge, just like that. And Charlie motions for the bus driver to back the bus out. Nobody could believe it, especially the mayor. Yep, Charlie was a hero. And a few months later, the new mayor awarded Charlie a key to the city, declaring it Charles Day, with free lollipops for everybody. This is a true story. It happened to a friend of mine. Oh, the former mayor? Well, he had to go find something else to do.
is a true story. It happened to a friend of mine. Okay, so Megan's not exactly a friend. I'm kind of more popular, and I hate to sound conceited. Prettier. Anyway, the story doesn't even start with Megan. It starts with Bradley, a boy who happened to be Megan's boyfriend. You see, Bradley's family had this real pain of a mutt called Nutmeg. Well, one morning, Bradley's mom noticed that Nutmeg wasn't up to her usual destructive self. She just kind of stayed curled up near the door and wasn't interested in anything but sleeping. So she bundled the mutt up and took her to the vet. Oh, the vet could see that something wasn't right, but he couldn't tell for sure without taking some tests. You know, he took some blood and asked Bradley's mom to bring in a sample of Nutmeg's poop for testing. Well, after dinner, Nutmeg went out for her usual run in the park. She asked Bradley to drop the sample off at the vet's on his way home from school the next day, but Bradley made all kinds of excuses so he wouldn't have to carry around that stuff. He claimed he had soccer practice. His mom said, "That's okay, the vet's open late." Then he said he's got to go to Dave's house to dissect a frog for science class. Yeah, right, like Bradley knew one end of a frog from another. The poor dog was real sick, and taking the sample to the vet was the least Bradley could do. Okay, so Bradley's mom, being considerate and all, wrapped the sample in a box so nobody would know what it was. Bradley could leave the box in his locker and drop it off at the vet on his way to studying or whatever. When Bradley got to school, he was glad to see that Dave, that's the kid who shared his locker, had the locker door open and ready for Bradley to slip his backpack in without too much fuss. But the backpack was bulging on account of the box of poop. So Bradley took the box out, shoved the backpack in, and put the box on the top shelf. Then Bradley headed off to his homeroom. And who did he bump into? His girlfriend, Megan. She was all excited because it was their 3-month anniversary. Well, Bradley wasn't totally stupid. He said that he did have something for Megan, but he wanted to give it to her after school. Bradley figured how at lunchtime he could get to the mall, buy a present, and get back without missing a class. But when Megan went to Bradley's locker to find him, so she'd know where and when to meet him after school, Dave was there, but no Bradley. And Megan spotted the box. Cool, she figured. Bradley really did get her something for their anniversary. And at lunch, she bragged to me that Bradley got her a present. But Bradley was so Bradley. I simply wouldn't believe he got Megan a present unless I could see it with my own eyes. I suggested Megan should go and open the locker. After all, girlfriends and boyfriends know each other's locker combinations. Megan felt like it wasn't the right thing to do. But then, along came Susan and Jody, who happened to be my friends, and we kind of ganged up on Megan, who still wouldn't give in. Now, Susan once was Dave's girlfriend. That was before his dermatological misfortunes. So she still knew the combination to the locker. And to our surprise, there it was. A box. But what could be in it? Well, Jody hovered close over the box while Susan opened it. The screams that exploded through the high school halls that day rattled the trophy case. Susan flung the box against the locker with such force that you-know-what splattered all over the place. Mostly all over Susan and Jody. Oh yeah, this is a true story. It happened to a friend of mine. And Nutmeg was just fine, even after she ate Bradley's science project. Turns out the dog loves frog's legs.
This is a true story. It happened to a friend of mine. Jenny was never afraid of anything. Even as a kid, you couldn't get a scare out of her. Not with spiders, not with snakes, not with nothing. Billy Krychuk once snuck a dead bat into her rain boots at school. She dissected it for extra credit. At Halloween, the kids would bet each other how many seconds they could stand on creepy Mrs. Wheeler's porch. Jenny won with an hour and a half. Nothing could shake her. That is, until last summer when that maniac got on the loose. Just looking at the wanted poster, you knew the guy was a classic psycho. Dirty trench coat, one crutch, broken glasses, and a wool cap. Mrs. Potter turned off her kitchen light one night to find him staring right back at her through the window. Henrietta Grimsby from 12th grade looked in her rearview mirror at the drive-in and saw him sitting in the back seat. So when Jenny's parents insisted she couldn't stay alone while they flew off to Aunt Mabel's wedding in Kapitsky, Jenny had other ideas. The biology final was only 4 weeks away, and there was work to be done on her elongated grub study. Jenny looked forward to a quiet weekend. Just her and the grubs. And Duke, of course. Oh, didn't I mention the family dog? 180 pounds of serious canine. I mean, the girl wasn't completely stupid. She studied for a little while, locked the door, and hit the sack early, with Duke on the floor beside her. But then there was a banging noise, then a series of dull thuds. Jenny's heart beat hard in her chest, her breathing shallow and quick as she stared blindly round her pitch-black room. Jenny pulled her foot out from under the covers and was searching for her slippers on the floor below, when she felt the gentlest of licking on the tips of her toes. Duke was sleeping under the bed. He'd be barking his head off if there was some maniac in the house, right? So Jenny just said, "Good dog," rolled over and went back to sleep. Minutes later, she was sitting straight up in bed, terrified. This time the noise was more like a scraping and a grunting and a kind of slobbering coming from deep in the belly of the house. Again, her foot searched for the slippers, and again a reassuring lick or two convinced Jenny that all was well. The third time Jenny woke up, she was nearly paralyzed with fear. The sound was a cry, a long, mournful wailing, like something from the dead, like a madman. Jenny tried to calm down. It was probably the wind, or maybe she'd left the TV on. She knew she had to go downstairs, but it was all she could do to pull her feet out from under the covers and swing them off the side of the bed. Again, there was a gentle licking. Duke was still there. So Jenny made her way to the door and down the stairs and into the deserted kitchen. Moonlight streamed through the window, throwing shadows across the tile and up the walls and over the cellar door. The cellar door. Whatever was making that horrible noise was there, down in the basement. So Jenny swallowed hard, reached for the doorknob, pulled the door open, and tried not to shudder as she flicked on the one little bulb. There was Duke, all sad and howling. Tail between his legs, empty packets of hamburgers scattered around, and an ashamed kind of look on his face. That's what all that noise had been. The slobbering and scraping and howling. The dog had been locked in the basement and... Then it hit her. How could the dog be locked in the basement? He'd been licking her feet the whole night. Then Jenny looked out the window, and there he was, running away from the house. Dirty trench coat, broken glasses, one crutch, and a wool cap. He looked back over his shoulder and shouted to Jenny, "I can lick too!" This is a true story. It happened to a friend of mine. Oh, Jenny was all right. She screamed and fainted and woke up with the dog really licking her feet this time. And she realized dogs do lick different than humans. They slobber less.
True story. It happened to a friend of mine, Freddie. That's what Frederica called herself. She was a regular 10-year-old kid, like me. But Freddie had to put up with an annoying 13-year-old brother named Teddy. Freddie and Teddy. Was that supposed to be cute or something? Anyway, Teddy's life was all about his electronic video games, his silly ant farm, his scary heavy metal posters, and the stupid comic books he hid under his bed. Even with all these hobbies, Teddy still had free time to bug his little sister. Like when Freddie would ask to play with Teddy's electronic games, Teddy'd say, "You're not old enough for Mega Monster Marauders." When she'd ask to see his precious ant farm, he'd say, "No way! If my ants see your dopey face, it'll scare them half to death!" And when Freddie skinned her knee, and her mom made her chocolate pudding to take her mind off the hurt, guess who sneaked in and ate the pudding before she could get to it? Yeah, right. Luckily, Freddie's favorite stuff wasn't pudding. It was maple syrup. Freddie loved maple syrup. Really loved it. It was her favorite food in the whole world. That's why Freddie loved to go to the pancake castle. Freddie's mom loved the Belgian waffles. Her dad loved the buttermilk pancakes. And her goomy brother loved to dunk Freddie's hair in the melted butter when Mom and Dad weren't looking. Now, Freddie'd always take home a bunch of those little maple syrup packets from the restaurant. She collected them. That was her hobby. By the time she was 10, she had more than 2,000 of those maple syrup packet things stuffed in the back of her closet. 2,000! Amazing! Anyhow, one day Teddy decided he needed to have some fun. You know, see how mad he could make Freddie. So while Freddie was playing jump rope with me, Teddy got to her maple syrup collection and began to poke tiny little holes in the packet so the maple syrup could drip out into a bucket. Poke, poke, poke. Drip, drip, drip. But one bucket wasn't enough to hold all the syrup that he was pouring. So Teddy emptied the bucket into the bathtub and filled another bucket. And another one. Then another. And later, when Freddie went home for her daily snack of pop-up waffles and maple syrup, she sat down at the table and slid 2 frozen waffles into the toaster. But when she peeled off the top of the maple syrup packet, nothing came out. She tried another packet. Empty. They were all empty. Empty, empty, empty. No maple syrup? It was payback time. Freddie got herself ready with a couple of boxes of frozen waffles. The trap was ready, and she set the bait, which in this case was her very own self. She went to Teddy's door, pulled it open, and unplugged his joystick, just as he was about to break his own world record of killing 18,000 of those Mega Monster Marauder things. "You're not gonna live till dinner," Teddy howled, and he took off after her, tearing down the hall. She led him on a wild chase through the house, then ambushed him at the bathroom door. Freddie flung her frozen waffles. Boom! A direct hit. Oof! Then another hit. Teddy took one frozen waffle hit after another. The attack continued. He backed his way into the safety of the bathroom. Back, 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 until he tripped and fell right into the bathtub. Into Freddie's maple syrup. Splash! He dragged himself up out of the slimy, gooey glop. "I'll get you for this!" he sputtered as the sticky maple syrup oozed down his body. And that's when Freddie released Teddy's precious ant collection. Thousands of them, the whole farm, flooded under the bathroom door. And we all know how ants love maple syrup. This is a true story. It happened to a friend of mine, Freddie. Now her big brother, Teddy, leaves her alone. He's learned his lesson, and he doesn't want to end up covered with orange marmalade, which is what Freddie now collects.
is a true story. It happened to a friend of mine, Murray, the landlord of my old apartment in the Pittman building on 12th Street. Actually, everybody called it the Pit because it was such a disgusting hole. But it didn't matter to me because I'm a traveling salesman. A hole to call my own is all I need. Besides, the worst part of living in the Pit wasn't how disgusting it was having to put up with Murray. Murray the Moocher was a real prize. For instance, when Murray came to collect the rent, it would always be at mealtime. He would stick around and mooch his dinner. Or when he'd help someone take in their groceries, he'd always mooch a few cans and boxes. And if anyone complained about a leaky water pipe, Murray would charge him extra for having a second shower. In fact, the last time Murray paid to repair anything in the building was 1972, when he bought an eyepiece for his doorway so he could see when the building inspectors were coming. Now, one thing I'll say for Murray, most landlords don't like you having pets. But at the Pit, the pets came free with the apartment. You guessed it. Murray's apartments all had rats. We're not talking furry little cartoon mice. We're talking rats the size of checker cabs with all the attitude and charm of Attila the Hun. Now, like I said, I'm a traveling salesman. So one particular month, the company gives me this perfume to unload. Well, actually, it was supposed to be perfume, but they tested it on rats, and did it stink. The smell of this stuff drove the rats crazy. They couldn't stand it. The company was stuck with 5,000 cases, so I figured, hey, why not sell it as rat spray? With Murray, I got a ready-made customer in my own building. One whiff of this stuff, and it's goodbye rats. Hello, potential rent increases. So I go down to see Murray. It was the first time I'd ever been to his basement apartment. Oh, looking around, I wasn't eager for a return trip. It was filthy. Anyway, I went into my pitch about the rat spray, but all Murray says is, I didn't pay for him to come here, so why should I pay for him to leave? But old Mr. Crandall, who's always hanging around in the hallway, he overheard our conversation and decides to order a bottle. And he tells Mrs. Thomas in 5E. And she tells Mr. Gillings in 2A. And before you know it, I'd sold out my entire inventory to every tenant in the building. Murray, of course, is loving this. Without having to spend a dime, he's gonna get a rat-free building, and he can charge double the rent. Pretty soon, everybody's spraying every nook and cranny of their apartments, me included. It smelled kind of like old sweat socks, but the rats, they couldn't stand it. They were running around everywhere, trying to get away from the smell. Within minutes, the whole building was as rat-free as a cat convention. The perfume really worked. But where had all the rats gone? The one place that hadn't been sprayed. Murray's apartment. A bunch of us went down there, and it was crawling with hundreds and hundreds of sharp-toothed, squeaky, foul-smelling rats. There was nowhere else for them to go. They were eating everything in sight. Food, furniture, everything. And in the corner, there was Murray, cowering like a baby. Then we saw what was, for Murray, the most horrific thing of all. The rats had eaten all the rent money Murray had been collecting for years, which was hidden in the bottom of cereal boxes where robbers wouldn't look. But rats just love cereal boxes. That was a true story. It happened to a friend of mine, Murray, who now insists on everyone paying their rent in coins.